Medtronic is one of about 50 U.S. companies using these inversions to reduce their tax bills. And now the U.S. Treasury is taking steps to block companies from reorganizing overseas. Joining us now to talk about what the administration can do is Andrew Friedman. He's the founder and managing partner at The Washington Update. Andy, welcome, and happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Tyler.
You're very well. We're so happy you're spending your birthday with us.
Happy to be with friends, yes.
All right,
I feel the same way.
Let's talk about what the administration can do. I gather that their palette of options is relatively limited to end these inversions.
I think you're right, Tyler. I mean, this is not the first time we faced inversions. These came up a number of years ago, and Congress gave us very particular rules saying that if a company merges with an offshore company and 20% at least of the shareholders after the merger are foreign entities, foreign people, then it's a good inversion. And there's no regulations that allow Treasury to do much to stop that. It really takes congressional action.
All right, so what can Treasury or the White House do in the meantime, whether it's, a partial fix or not? What exactly can they do to change that and disincentivize American companies from doing these inversions?
Well, there's a couple things they can do, Susie. First of all, there's jawboning. I mean, the president has made it clear that these companies leaving the United States is unpatriotic. And believe it or not, that's having some effect. Walgreens is suggesting maybe it won't do that. Companies that get a lot of money from the IRS, say through Medicare reimbursements, are going to be hesitant. The second thing is that inversions is kind of the cake, but there's big icing on this cake, and that is once a company inverts, it can have the foreign parent loan money to the U.S. subsidiary, and the subsidiary pays interest out of the United States back to the parent, and that interest is deductible. This is called earnings stripping because it lowers their earnings here in the U.S. And their Treasury does have a lot of authority to say those aren't really loans and that isn't really interest and the amount shouldn't be deductible.
That's really a payment of equity back to the company that should not be deductible. Could the federal government say to these companies, you mentioned it with respect to Medicare and Medicaid, could the federal government say to these companies, if you do this, we're not going to do any business with you, we're not going to have it, you're not going to have any federal contracts? Absolutely.
In fact, some senators have asked the president to do just that, issue an executive order and say, if you're going to move out of the U.S., you're no longer going to do business with the federal government. And that is, again, something that can force those companies to rethink moving offshore.
How big a problem is this really? And we just reported that about 50 American companies have done this over the last decade. It doesn't sound like a whole lot. Is this more headlines, or is this a real serious threat to the U.S. economy?
I'm not so sure it's that big a threat, Susie. You might have seen the article in Reuters yesterday, which looked back at all the companies that have inverted, and it turns out their earnings have been lower since the inversion than they were before the inversion. Now, that may not be because of the inversion, but it's certainly not a panacea that's giving companies wonderful earnings. I'm not sure it's that huge a deal, but if you really want to address it, you address it with tax reform. You lower the corporate tax rate here so companies don't want to move offshore.
But the effective tax rate for corporations is low. It's not comparatively with others. It's not the nominal or the stated rate. It's what they pay when all is said and done, right, Andy?
Right. That's right, Tyler. But the reason it's low is because companies are moving their operations overseas. So we had the Apple CEO testify last year in Congress. They've moved all their manufacturing overseas. They've lowered their effective tax rate. So it means that they have less U.S. earnings and they're paying less U.S. taxes.
All right. Once again, happy birthday, Andrew Friedman with The Washington Update.
Take care now.